Hello, my name is Douglas Bloch. I'm an author and depression counselor. Welcome to your Depression Recovery channel, where each week we talk about practical tools and coping strategies for healing from depression and anxiety. The title of today's video is Men in Depression. When I was first writing my book, Healing from Depression, many years ago and was doing research, I came across a statistic. Actually, many times I saw this statistic that said women are twice as likely to get depressed as men. And I thought, well, maybe that's true. Women are more emotional. But when I started running depression support groups, I found that wasn't the case. In fact, one of my groups had 9 men and 1 woman, and the others were about 50-50. Then one day, I ran across a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It, The Secret of Men's Depression by therapist Terrence Real. And after 20 years of working with men and their families, Real became convinced that depression was a silent epidemic among men, and that men often hid their depression from their families, their friends, and even themselves to avoid the stigma of depression being unmanly. And that typical behaviors we associate with men, which might be domestic violence or workaholism or alcoholism or fear of intimacy, these are actually their attempts to escape from depression. And of course, these behaviors hurt their families and those they love. Now, I believe that the stigma of men and depression, or men having depression, comes from living in a culture where feelings of vulnerability are considered weak and unacceptable. This is especially epitomized by the phrase, what is it, big boys don't cry? Yeah, big boys don't cry. And I don't know if, hopefully fathers are not saying this to their sons now, but when I was growing up, that's what we heard. And so as a result, men will often avoid situations where strong feelings come up because, again, they don't want to be seen as weak. Now, this was really exhibited during my depressive episode, which I wrote about in the book, When Going Through Hell Don't Stop. And I talk about how the only people who really stood beside me throughout the whole episode were women. One by one, my men friends dropped away. And when I finally questioned one after the episode ended, he said, well, I just got so uncomfortable around you. I was afraid that I was going to get depressed. I couldn't handle it. And so what he actually meant is that my depression, my feelings of pain were actually stimulating his own feelings of pain. And that was something that was unacceptable because he just couldn't let himself feel. Now, I find it incredible, actually unbelievable, that depression is considered a sign of weakness in men, given the fact that so many male leaders have suffered from depression. Examples include Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, who called his depression the black dog. Now, Lincoln is a particularly interesting example. I mean, he's probably our greatest president, and yet he achieved this greatness in spite of long periods of despairing depression he had throughout his adulthood, probably caused by the early death of his mother and the cold treatment at the hands of his father. One example of how Lincoln's depression affected him can be seen by what happened on the eve of his wedding. Normally a joyful time, but yet Lincoln was wandering down by the river with a knife in his hands, morbid, obsessed, depressed, threatening to kill himself. He had to be watched over by friends to make sure he was safe. And yet he rose to become probably our greatest president. So what's the moral of the story? If you're a man, if you're suffering from depression, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Remember, many of our greatest leaders, such as Roosevelt and Lincoln and Churchill, suffer from depression. Don't let the fear of being seen as weak or excessively feminine keep you from reaching out. Between 50 to 60% of the people who have depression don't ask for help. You don't want to become part of that statistic. Remember the first 2 steps in my depression recovery program. Set the intention to heal and reach out for support. Without the second step, not much happens. No one can hold a vision of wellness for you or help you get well unless you reach out. So say to yourself, depression is not a sign of weakness. Reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of courage. And I have the courage to acknowledge my pain and to get help for it. This has been Douglas Bloch. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned something from it. If you want to give me your feedback, you can write your comments in the comments section, or you can email me, douglasbloch@gmail.com. If you want to learn more information about my work, you can do so during the closing credits. The image at the top of the screen, top left, if you click on that, you'll be able to subscribe to this channel. If you click on the image in the lower right of the screen, you'll be taken to my website, healingfromdepression.com, and the other images will simply allow you to watch some of my recent videos. And until we meet again, I wish you the best in your mental health recovery. Thank you for watching.